live. I like it. Hey, congregation. Sorry for the late start. I had an autism meltdown to put out, and then, but Jenny's here on time. Good job, Jenny.
Well, sort of. I was here at like 7:02, so I was a couple minutes late too.
Cool. So, sorry everyone, but we're here now. Shall we start with an opening hymn?
I love the hymns. They're my favorite thing. Joe, I've been telling my followers for years that the one thing I miss about church is like the organ and the music and all the meaningful stuff. And you brought that life back to life for me. So
I'm glad. My partner doesn't like the new one. My partner says I make too many songs about white men. I'm like, wow, Max can't help that he's a white dude. But yeah, hey, that's cool though. I like it. Which hymn shall we do? It's Jenny's pick.
It's Jenny's pick. I really liked the Anne Franklin.
Oh yeah, let's do it. I have Studio Ghibli running in the other room because it is JoJo's. It is his magic potion. I am gonna disappear during him, so I could go turn it down a little bit. So yeah.
Hidden away, a young girl writes treasured thoughts by candlelight, yet unaware, with hopes held fast, these secret words were her last. First book and last, a child's tone, candid whisper, a secret home, unsilenced now for every age, Anne's testament on every page, an offered kiss, a girl admired, her innocence and youth inspired, a passion burns in the diarist's heart, a secret wish, a forgotten start. First book and last, a child's tone, candid whisper, a secret home, unsilenced now for every age, Anne's testament on every page, betrayed by friends, Nazis took her away to the camps, her words remained, her breath cut short, lives through her pen, though censored once, and lives again.
Woo! Powerful, am I right?
Good. Yeah, absolutely. So here's one of the reasons why I love that hymn. For hundreds of thousands of years of human history, we didn't have writing. So as we go back and research human-like organisms on the earth, it's just a lot of fossil records, and then we have like some cave drawings and things like that but language was very likely, like spoken language evolved slowly and was very rudimentary. And the ability to actually then take our thoughts and be able to speak them and then write them down so that we could transmit those thoughts to other humans is a very new technology. And it's a really incredible technology that I can take a pen and a piece of paper and write something, and you can read it and know what I'm thinking and experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And just the profoundness of how many humans lived and their history is erased, and all we have is a fossil tooth or a femur bone or a part of their skull. That's all. We don't know what they went through. We don't know what they experienced. And now we have the written word, which is miraculous.
Mm-hmm.
And for this young girl in the time of the Holocaust to be able to make a record of her life, which was later discovered, and I have read and you have read, and tens of millions, maybe billions of people upon the face of the earth have read the experience of one human, is absolutely mind-blowing to me.
Mm.
And it puts us in her experience. I don't have to necessarily live in an annex in Europe during the time of Hitler's horrible reign to be able to connect in just a little bit through the window that she's giving me into her life to the horror and the fear, but also the hope and everything that she went through. It is absolutely profound. And that little hymn of yours just encapsulates all of that in a beautiful way.
I love that. And, seeing when you're talking about that, one of the other interesting things about that, one of our lives last week, one of our services, well, no, it wasn't during service. It was on Gene Judson's show. I got into a conversation with Sam Pinson, who used to be a Mormon bishop. And we were talking about Jacob Hansen, that episode, blah, blah, blah. We don't have to waste time.
I didn't know you were going to say test words today. What?
I'm sorry. Yeah, we do swear a little bit. Jacob Hansen. Never mind. But he, but we were
very nice guy.
we talked about consciousness, and I got into theory of mind, and they were not having it. Nobody else was having it. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll keep my opinion to myself. That's fine, cool. But Dan Vogel got on there. I think it was Dan Vogel. He got in and he said,
that's fun when Dan Vogel just rolls up in your comment section.
Yeah, that was the first time. And he came up in the comments again the next day on service. I'm like, my goodness, that sermon. And but he said consciousness comes from language. I was like, oh, see, now that is quite a thing. It's like like Steven Pinker talks about that a lot. But anyway, in any event, but I was thinking about how there were the first neuroscience experiments were based around reading, and they didn't even know. There's this Russian scientist who went out and tried to find out why country bumpkins aren't as smart as city slickers. This is very Soviet Union thinking at the time. So there's a Soviet project to say why are right. And so he's like, well, if we can figure out what the difference is, then all the people who live in rural areas in Soviet Russia we can figure out how to make them more intelligent, and then we will definitely become the world's greatest superpower. And so so basically, long story short of it is he would ask people, he would use logical questions, basically like a small IQ test. And he discovered the difference between people who could answer IQ test questions correctly and easily versus those who couldn't answer them at all was that they were all younger men in these villages. And he asked them, he's like, why is it that the young men are able to answer these questions? The older generations aren't. Nobody else is. And one of these people are like, oh, don't listen to them. They all think they're so smart because the moms take them into town because they say they have to know how to read Quran, and they teach them to read Quran. And so now they all think they're brilliant and we're all dum-dums. And it turns out that's how they discovered that there's this window in childhood where your ability to do logic is trained up by your learning to read during that window. It actually develops your brain differently. And that's pretty curious, because now we're even discovering there are people who say they don't have an internal narrator. Like Like, the voice inside your head that says, okay, I'm going to try this. Okay, come on, Jenny, I can do
I
this.
wouldn't
You can do
trust
this.
those people. Who are these people? Who doesn't have an internal narrator?
That's like a whole thing. Like, people say that. They're like, who even are you people? And what are you doing? But there are people.
Are these people in a coma? Are like who are these people? My internal narrator is always going. I have like 3 of them right now while simultaneously listening to you narrate. So I don't trust these people. So there's people that don't have an internal narrator, and
I have no idea. They don't know. They don't know why. But there has to be. I think it has to have something to do with language, but I don't know. I don't think anybody knows yet. I don't know. I don't know enough about it, but it's intriguing because, like Sam Harris in his book Waking Up, he talks about like those thoughts that come up to you, go, we got to get out of here, and it's like, or we got to get to the store. And it's like, and you think about those words like we, the fuck is we? Like, who's talking, and who am I in this scenario? Am I the other part of we? So who is the thinker and who's the receiver of the thoughts? What's going on? And so it's one of the great mysteries is, we have this consciousness, but it's interesting because, like, I was thinking about today, one of my favorite writers is Rollo May, and he, he's an existential psychotherapist. I think maybe we talked about him real briefly once, but does that sound familiar?
I just don't have one of his books like under my pillow or anything, but it sounds familiar.
Man. What are you doing?
I know,
but no,
right?
but like he basically his whole thing was anxiety, and he wanted to help people to overcome their anxiety with existential philosophy as well as psychotherapy. And it was I tell you, it was eye-opening to me, this guy's work, because basically he comes up with this idea that you have your internal world, and then you have the real world outside of you, outside your body, and they just are never going to line up. You see the world the way you see it. It's never going to be exactly the way that the world is. And
when you're seeing it right now, it's already too late because we're experiencing something that's already 3 seconds in the past. That's
right. That's exactly right. And so, and that you don't see everything exactly as it is, right? Because there are magic tricks. There are tricks of the light. The rods and cones, they say, in your eyes are as different from each other as our fingerprints, if not more so. And so it's like, and so that means what, right? So that means that you and I can both be looking at something red, but do we see the same red? It's not the same. It's like your red is very plausibly as unique to you as your fingerprints. So it's like
our sensory devices that are feeling the world around us are also unique, that you're not feeling the world and experiencing the world and conscious of the world in the same way that I am.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Right.
And I may not experience the world in the same way tomorrow that Jenny of yesterday did either.
Right. And here's another one that's wild. Somebody said this to me the other day. I got to check it out and I guess it makes sense, but it just about broke my brain. I saw this thing and said, if you take a child out of its mother's womb and put a watch on their wrist and put a synchronized watch on mother's wrist, and then send them off along their ways, bring them back so many X number of years later, and their watches they carried with them are going to be on a different time, because they're just moving at different speeds through the universe. And it's like they're experiencing time differently. I'm like, what? I have to check and see if that's true. It's like, I'm like, I guess that, wait, make me understand. I'm like, I thought I understood relativity. Now I'm not so sure.
Okay, now you're going to do me. I'm 5'3", and you just dove me into the 6 foot side of the pool.
I think it's definitely the 6'1" pool, because I'm 5'11".
Well, Joe, tonight we wanted to start a new theme, right?
That's right. This is What Do You Think Wednesday?
It's What Do You Think Wednesday? And here's the reason why I want to do this. Because as I dialogue about my transition from Mormonism to Christianity to atheism, and I've just about 2.5 years now since I broke up with Jesus and plunged off the cliff into atheism. When I dialogue about that online, I reach millions of people a month in my various different platforms. And so then I get a lot of feedback. I get a lot of feedback from people, and I get a lot of questions and a lot of commentary. And I'm discovering that, like, really a lot of people have never thought about atheism, and people are so steeped in their own religious traditions, whether it's Christianity, Islam, Judaism, whatever, spirituality, whatever their religious traditions are, that they've never really unpacked anything about atheism or seen any reason to. But then some of my followers are like, we love Jennie and we like Jennie, and now Jennie's an atheist. So what the hell is that? And I get a lot of really specific questions and comments. And so I find myself like I'm typing out to Joe in Australia, and then to Mary over in England. I'm answering a question of one person at a time. And I brought to you, what if we on our Church of Korihor answer some of these questions in a format that's totally unscripted, just a couple questions at a time, and hearing both of our perspectives on it, and just a really simple question answered. What do you think about this? And then you go, and then I go. And not necessarily like a super deep dive where either one of us is prepared, other than just the preparation of life and research and experiences that we've had leading up to this moment. But and not necessarily just like, I believe, like a testimony of feel good, but what evidence do you have? So what do you think about this? And then why? So that we can kind of like help people understand and unpack a little bit about the crazy atheists like us that are out there in the world.
I like it.
So
let's do it.
So that's what we do today. So did you come up with a question too? Because I have a couple, and then I added one. And then did you have one too, or two?
I did.
Okay.
I have at least one.
Okay.
Who starts? Do you want me to start?
So I start with a question, and then you start with a question?
Yeah, you start. Yeah,
okay,
that's
it.
That's
question, and you do one?
Yeah.
Okay. So my first question that I got from a commenter is, as an atheist, what do you believe about creation? Do you believe in any intentful creation for specifically planet Earth and the universe, or was it just all a big accident? So created Earth.
I love that. It's a good question. So I would say, I don't think that there's any purpose. I don't think there's a designer, so I don't think there's a purposeful design to the universe. Now, which means that there's no unmoved mover first cause. But at the same time, I think we have to approach it as atheists. I think we approach it from a position of humility, or at least we should, to say, but we don't know. And the real difference there is, in the Korihor argument, I talk about, it may seem disingenuous to some people to say, look, we have to look at it like a detective. We are here. We can tell by clues going into the past only as far as we have clues. But that may seem absurd to somebody, and they're like, well, that doesn't tell you anything good and useful. But imagine how much more useless it is to say, no, I'm just going to go way out here in the dark and stake a claim and say, nope, that's the beginning, and then draw a line to here. It's like, you could have gone anywhere with that. Why right there? Well, just to have a start. Well, that's no good. that's no good at all. And in the Korihor argument,
I really like that.
Right? It's like if you start with the conclusion, you're not doing it honestly, in my opinion. You know what I mean? It's like I call it the parable of the racist detective. I said it's a very, the worst kind of detective is the one who shows up to every scene and says, right, which Jew did this then? And then he goes out and says, don't you worry, we're going to find the Jew that did this. It's like, well, you're the worst detective ever, because you've already decided, you've already gone to a foregone conclusion. So it's like to say, well, I see the hand of creation in the wings of a butterfly, or in the amazing spiral shapes of a galaxy. How could that not have a designer? The answer is, well, that one's mostly gravity, and that one's, that one's mostly radiation, and that one's mostly the nutrients that creature eats. And it's like it seems to our mind created because we're out here looking for patterns that indicate creators, because we're social beings. So looking for other social beings, looking for other minds to connect to. So
And
I think
God
that's
is
what.
a being.
Yeah, you got it. Cool. What do you think? How do you feel about the creation question?
Well, so do you think that it was created, or are you saying you don't think that it was created, but that humility bit is we really don't know. We don't believe that we have the technology to prove one way or another.
So I don't think it
Is
was
that what you're
created, but
saying?
right. I don't think that we have any reason yet to believe that it was created by a consciousness like the narrator in our heads. But
Okay.
the narrator in our heads, is that just molecules knocking around inside molecules interacting with other molecules? As far as we can tell, yes. But if that's the case, and the molecules knocking around in our heads are star stuff, then does the star stuff have to say, I am man, before it goes out and creates something? Or if the star stuff, as it's making things, is creating things in exactly the same way that we create? It's a good question, right? And so if that's the case, well, then the universe is designed, it is created, if there's no difference between star stuff knocking around in gravity and everything out there versus knocking around inside here. It's all part of the same creative process. We are just a part of that creative process. So that's a beautiful thing, in my opinion.
That is really beautiful. And I think when I have the discussion, when people ask me about creation, then they are picturing what they've already had implanted into their brains of that social creature out there in the universe who's smarter than all of us, who created it all. And right. I do not see any evidence for a God in the universe, any type of God, male, female, multiple gods. I don't see any evidence for that. I don't think that there's something out there that's any higher, more significant, more intelligent than us. So I almost feel like the creation thing is kind of a trick question to me. I don't believe in like some divine guy who knows everything, and he's like, here's how we're gonna, here's the blueprints, boom, there's Earth. And as a Christian, that was what was deeply transfused into my mind. Like, there's a God, and he makes Earth perfect. He makes Adam and Eve, he makes this animal life that, like, the lions don't have to eat anything and not a leaf falls from the tree. That was it Bruce R. McConkie that said not a leaf fell from the tree in the Garden of Eden? And I believed that. I believed that God made this perfect, self-sustaining, immortal world in this incredible frozen state. And then Adam and Eve ate the fruit, everything fell and became corrupted. And in seminary, I learned this word that was devolution, which is like evolution, but we're devolving. So I believed that God made us perfect, and then because of our bad choices, the world was becoming this dead world where it would eventually just completely die, implode, we'd have Armageddon, and then God would have to resurrect the entire earth. That's the concept that I had as a Christian. Once I shed that and really stepped back from things, I don't believe in that. And I think it's a trick question when Christians who have that in their minds come at us and ask. I think personally that epigenetics, which they started to kind of tap into after the Human Genome Project, completely disproves the creation myth. Because to assume that there was this perfect Adam and Eve, then we would assume that we are never changing. I had a conversation with a friend of mine this week who's Christian, and he asked about eyebrows. He's like, to me, the fact that we have eyebrows, which perfectly just protects things from falling into our eyes, and that little shelf at our skull, and the eyelashes to catch the breeze, that to me proves that there is a God who perfectly designed us. The fact that we have this heart that beats automatically without having to be plugged into anything, this electrical system, that proves to me that there's a God. Well,
Right.
to me, then we would have to find through epigenetics that humans have never changed, that we have never evolved, that humans 100 years ago would be exactly like humans today, and going back 6,000 years ago, and 10,000 years ago, and 50,000 years ago, and the 100,000 years of human fossil record that we have, we would expect that we'd never change. In the Human Genome Project, they actually found just the opposite, which essentially disproves all of Judeo-Christian thought and all creationists that come in with perfectionism as the base, because God made man in his image and we were perfect from the beginning. Because the Human Genome Project shows that our genes are always evolving and that our consciousness is always adapting our form around the earth. Always.
Mm.
We're always evolving in our own lifetime by turning genetic expression off and on. So I have a friend who is a scientist that works with genetics. He's a genetic scientist who is not part of the original Human Genome Project, but that's what he's done for a career for 50 years. And we've talked extensively about this. And when they first did the Human Genome Project, they found all of these little genetic mutations. And then they're like, all right, now we can go to, for example, a woman with the breast cancer gene, and we can let her know you will get breast cancer in this lifetime. So that's what they did in the first little bit. But then 98% of women with the breast cancer gene didn't get breast cancer. They just didn't get it. Only 2% did. So the scientists had to go back and evaluate, and that's when they began to discover epigenetics, which is the genetic expression, the turning off and on of our genes. And what they discovered is that even if your body has that hard baked into the genetic sequence, our thoughts and our interactions with our atmosphere around it, whether that's toxins or sunshine or the foods that we eat, nutrigenomics is a huge field of study that's really fascinating, that if you eat a carrot versus a chocolate bar, that's turning off and on your genes. And specifically like meditation, happiness, sadness, being in good relationships versus bad relationships, those things are informing our physical form, and both human life and animal life and plant life is constantly responding to the earth around us. That completely disproves perfect earth creation, undeniably. Because what really happens is at some point that, like you say, we don't have the technology to discover. And as atheists, I think that we're always stepping into that space of humility, that I have the humility that we don't know. This isn't provable or unprovable because we simply weren't there. We don't have a recording of it. We don't have the technology to really grasp it yet. But at some point, consciousness and a life force did begin. And through the Human Genome Project and the discovery of epigenetics, we can surmise that that consciousness began adapting to the earth around it, to the environment, and then at some point to its own inner environment. If I'm happy, if I'm sad, if I have good hormones and good chemicals flowing through my body and a good environment and good relationships, then I'm adapting my physical form to that. And that is absolutely contrary to a divine mind who perfectly created everything in its perfect form. So why do we have eyebrows? Because as we adapted to the planet and turned genes off and on, we grew eyebrows over the course of hundreds of thousands of years. My blonde hair and blue eyes is as recent as between 6,000 and 10,000 years ago, because my ancestors migrated north and they needed to absorb more vitamin D. So we were able to respond to the environment around us and start to dump some of that pigment, and our eyes got blue and our skin got white and our hair got blonde, and it uncoiled so that we could warm ourselves and absorb vitamin D so that we could continue to live. And if we have these concepts of a brilliant creator, we should have had that in the very beginning. We should have been born to be able to live in Scandinavia and all of those, the Northern European lands perfectly from the very get-go. So,
especially if we all started out in the Gulf of Mexico or in Jackson County, Missouri.
Gulf of America, maybe. As of today, did you look at Google Maps? It's now the Gulf of America.
Oh, that's right, the Gulf of America.
Yeah, it's on Google Maps. So, yeah, especially if we all came from Adam on Diamond in Missouri and branched out. We should have been adapted at that very point. God should have made the bodies perfect and everything perfect so that we wouldn't see epigenetics or any type of changing, mutatable expression.
Right.
Period. Hard stop. Full stop.
Right. Yeah. So I think you beautifully just took apart what is, I think it's attributed to William Paley, who wrote a book called Natural Theology, as the watchmaker theory. And, is that if you were walking through a forest and you dashed your foot on a rock, but it's not a rock, it's a watch, and you picked it up and you saw how it worked, you'd say, okay, well, somebody made this. A watch has to have a watchmaker. And it's like, unless you have all of these primitive watches like lined up in a row, and it's like each one is a little bit different, then no, you wouldn't say that, you'd say, wow, these watchmakers, they'd be having babies. These watches are having baby watches. And that's it. So yeah, that's a cool one. Well, let me throw this one out at you.
What do we think?
Yeah. So a while ago, you and I were talking about this before a little bit. So yeah, so I gave you a preview on this one. A while ago, there was a conversation among atheists, particularly at some of the Skepticon conferences, about why it's such a sausage fest whenever we get atheists together. Too many dudes, too many misters, not enough sisters. So,
it's all dudes.
Yeah, pretty much. And neckbeards. So,
you need those in Utah, though. It's cold up there.
Yeah. I've had this since I was in Arizona, though. I actually grew my beard out for a role in a play, and then just kept coming back to it. But so do you think that women? Do you think there really are fewer women who are atheists, or is there a stigma among women against admitting that they're atheist? What do you think about that?
Okay, so I'm going to answer this not knowing the data. So I'm just purely going to say, out of humility, I don't know the actual answer. I haven't researched the actual answer. So I'm going to say what I think. They say that you can tell how committed somebody is to religion and why they participate in religion by exposing their greatest fears. And you can do this as a self-exercise too. So if I think about the most painful, traumatizing moments in my life and what I feared the most in those things, then that gives you the answer to why you participate in religion and why you have faith. So for me, my grandma died, and then I had a best friend die when I was 8, and I had children as a mother. One of my daughters almost died. We actually found her deceased in the desert. She was revived. She had a heat stroke. And then as a mom, there's this deep fear of loss of children. So death, and specifically the death and very traumatic loss of some key figures in my life, was my deepest fear, huge, primal fear. Wow. So then you can draw that line then to why did Jennie participate in religion? I didn't even like a lot of the stuff about the Mormon church, if I'm being honest. Looking back, it's that stuff really squeezed me, and I didn't care about this or that or the other thing. But I cared deeply about the plan of salvation, about temple covenants, and about eternal life. So those things, I always went to the temple. I always had my temple recommend. I threw myself into those because juxtaposed against my greatest fear was I'm terrified I'm never going to see my grandma again. But if I go to the temple, can pay my tithing, do all the things that I can to make myself worthy of eternal life, then I will live with my grandma again. So my religion balanced out my greatest fear to help me adapt to life and just get out of bed every day without having to face those most primal fears. So I think that less women are atheist because I think that more women have more fears, especially around relational things. Not that men aren't connected to their spouses or their moms or their dads. Not that men don't fear death, but once you become a mom, you have so many fears around losing your children, or I had an ovarian tumor when I was 36 years old, so I really leaned into my faith because I was told that I would die. I did die. I had a near-death experience for 3 minutes. Like I had so many fears around dying. I had so many fears around my kids getting hurt that I leaned into religion because it really helped me to cope with motherhood. And then control also. So that fear of losing my kids, the fear of something happening to one of my kids, the fear of something happening to me. And then I have this hope of eternal life with my kids. And then also that control issue as a mom, the world is so rough. And like, there's so many things that happen, car accidents and I don't know, kidnappings, all those big things that as a mom that sometimes you think about. And just every time my kids walked out the door to school, there can be school shootings. There can be a multitude of different things. We had friends whose children were a child that was diagnosed with cancer really young, a friend whose child drowned in a backyard pool. So as parents, we're facing these really hard things, and religion gave me control. When I send my kids out the door, I can say a prayer, and now I know that God is holding my children in his hands. I can wear my garments and go to the temple, and now I know that God is protecting my children. And I think that because of the inherent fear for the people around us as women, as wives, as mothers, as sisters, and feeling often as women sometimes more vulnerable than the men do and less able to draw in resources and solve problems, I think that more women lean into religion to assuage these fears and help us to cope than men. That's my thought. So I think that there are more women than men who believe in religion, even if women are stepping away from church, they still have faith in God and the Virgin Mary and, Heavenly Father or Allah or Buddha or whoever. I think that women have more to fear in many ways than men.
Interesting.
And also, atheism is so patriarchal and so exclusive, and so many like educated scientists and things like that, that we women like inherently aren't as educated in the United States. Women fall far behind in education levels and opportunities. We've been, housewives. There's still like 36% of women that are housewives and things like that today. Like women haven't had those opportunities for education. So we see these atheist guys and we don't relate to them. Like I listen to Hitchens and it's like, I don't get that. I don't understand these guys. And this is not for me. It is very like off-putting for females.
That's an interesting point that they leave off on there, because like, I mean, because it's interesting on a couple points there, because like they say now more STEM field graduates now are women than men.
That's crazy. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so this new generation, and it's interesting because like I don't know a lot of the younger people. I mean, I know my kids, but I do see that there's less stigma for women who are younger now to just come out with I never really believed in God. It was not God's not part of my life. 40% of Gen
X is atheist. 40% of Gen X is atheist.
Wow, that's interesting. Same. So I think that there is something to that, and it's not that they're and it's like I can't help but wonder if it's how much of that is information and how much of it is processing. Because like a lot of it, a lot of people become atheists when we're adults, and we've got a little bit, we got to a developmental stage where we can process information, where we have more information processing. But then you ask people, what was the thing that sold you on it? And usually it is either an experience or it's a piece of information. And it's like, like evolution or like, or something like that. Or it's like a near-death experience, or it's some, as it was for you, I understand, right? That really made you come around on this. Yeah, this is the point where I should know for sure this was God. And it wasn't. You came out of it deciding, no, it wasn't.
Well, so I came out of it thinking I had a near-death experience. The Mormon Church is definitely true. And that's where I was for 3 years. So it wasn't until I left the church and then went back and kind of deconstructed that it was like, oh, yeah, that wasn't. I was just in a phase in my life where everything supported the church. Like if I lost a $10 bill and then a year later I found a $10 bill just like blowing across the street, oh, that's Heavenly Father. And the church is true because I've been so righteous that I'm blessed with another $10 bill. like just everything. I could find a message in a fortune cookie, and I was Heavenly Father, and the church was true. So I was definitely like that confirmation bias was always operating. So my near-death experience was the church was true. But I did have this little moment of, oh, I had this experience, but also like nobody was like, oh, and the Book of Mormon, like I wasn't outside of my body and somebody was like, I am Joseph Smith. And, or, you know, I am Jesus, the only begotten son. I didn't have any of that, but I was kind of grasping at what there was of the experience and using that to confirm the church being true, because that was my main objective in life at all times. So
intriguing. I think that's such a fascinating.
Why do you think that there are more men than women? And why do you think that is? Why do you think that atheism is so male?
I don't know. I mean, I think that part of it is, I think that part of it was that most of the opinion leaders were men at the beginning, and men do tend to be very instinctually tribal. Or at least I know my experience as a man. That's always been a thing. Is that it's like, oh yeah, this guy is strong, and he's representing my opinions and my ideas very strongly. So yeah, you and I were a hunter group, and so we start to band around and like bring and invite other men, and then I think you end up. I don't know. I can't speak to what women experience, right? Because I obviously, the more I talk to women about their experience, the more I go, I thought I know what women experience, and I don't know it all. But I can't imagine, but that for a lot of women, when they see a lot of men in one place at one time, some kind of safety alarm, some kind of protection has to come up that goes, that's a lot of dudes in one place at one time. That's a lot of opportunities for me to get hurt. And some alarm bell goes up that goes, I don't know that I'm safe here, but I don't know. I mean, so the more I think I understand women's experience, the more I realize I really need to not pretend I understand women's experience.
Yeah, so next time we're going to research the male to female ratio in atheism and why, because it is always men. There's a comment that God is making a comeback in Gen Z, and that's actually not statistically true. So there are certainly people that are embracing spirituality and reading their Bibles again and things like that, but people aren't going to church. Church attendance is still declining, and it was clear through the end of 2024. All Pew Research shows that church attendance is declining in all generations. I do see some people like, oh, I'm reading my Bible again. And, you know, I've been kind of in a weird holding pattern of like agnosticism versus atheism, whatever. And now I'm leaning into spirituality and I have faith in a God, but I don't know that God is Jesus or the Trinity or what. There is a resurgence of that. So according to Pew Research, the fastest growing religious demographic right now is the nuns, the non-religiously affiliated. And that is a whole huge spectrum of people. So some of them are spiritual. Some of them are Christian, but they don't believe that they should go to church or that Christianity expects them to do anything. Some of them are agnostic. Some of them are atheists. Like those nuns, the non-religiously affiliated, it's a wide spectrum of people, but people are not going back to church. Nobody is flocking to churches. Those who are attending church, a lot of the research shows, are the most pious and the most orthodox ever. And partly because like now there's all this chaos going in. So people are really like the most orthodox people that you can think of in the Catholic Church. They are now super Catholic and they're becoming like super conservative. So like these really old fashioned Catholic values. We're renegotiating now birth control and all kinds of things that like for a couple generations, we're like, aren't we kind of past that? Like, I don't have to not use birth control to be a Catholic. But the most ultra Orthodox are leaning into religions in new and like more intense ways. But Gen Z is not going to church more.
Interesting. Yeah. And there's something interesting here that I've always wondered about. It's like, you mentioned like parenting for women. Is like for your experience as a woman, like having that family connection, the continuation of generations, being connected from generation to generation, dealing with death and things like that. I when I have conversations with younger women who have small children, that say, yeah, even if it doesn't make sense that God is there, I definitely want to go to church because I want that experience for my kids. And for a lot of people, that relationship with God, for a lot of women, it seems to me, like who are of early childbearing years, it is that experience of, I hate that term, early childbearing years, but anyways, but yeah, when you have little kids, it's that structure story. I want the kids to have structure. I want the kids to have traditions. I want them to have time to be kids. And it's like,
Well, it's where they learn their values from too. Like, if I don't take my kids to church, then where are they going to learn values outside of me? Because churches supplanted our natural human communities. You know, for hundreds of thousands of years, we didn't have churches, and we had these tribal communities, and we had natural elders within the tribe. That's actually how humans should exist. We should have organic tribal connections. We should have organic elders and children, and a wide variety of multi-generational types of people within our tribes, and we should learn from and respect their wisdom. Then religion came in, and we can actually see through archaeology and all kinds of different evidence, we can see the first people burying their dead with items that the dead didn't need, and we see worship and ritual develop. It didn't start with humans. We created it. We can trace the evolution of religion, and as religion develops and gets a stronghold, then as we civilize and build walled societies, when we follow that timeline, then we see religion supplanting and replacing our natural tribal connections. We no longer have tribal elders. We don't look up to grandma. We don't look up to the wise old uncle. We look up to the church people. We look up to the religious leaders, those that are, the prophets and the seers and the people with the magic powers. And for so long in human history, I almost look at religion as a parasite on our natural organic tribalism. For so long of human history, we have had religion that has knocked all of that other stuff out, that right now in the year 2025, if I'm a woman with children, I no longer have a tribe. If I don't go to church, then my kids don't have elders. My kids don't have the wisdom of multi-generational tribal members. I have to have the Boy Scout leader. I have to have their youth group leader. I have to have the pastor, because we've lost all of that inherent organic natural tribalism and the multi-generational structure.
Yeah. Yeah. I that's interesting about that you mentioned that, the parasite idea, because that resonates with me. I've often said, I feel like spirituality and ritual were a natural cause, both effect and a natural effect of our life cycle experience for our ancestors, and for us individually, for all us conscious beings over our course of our lives. But then religion was like an artifact of that, like an artifact, that's an aberration. It was a byproduct of that. And it's like, just the fact that it became so infused with money in Western culture is how we get most of what people hate about religion in our culture. Because like people in Eastern society, you stop practicing the Eastern religions. Like, yes, okay, there's some stigma, especially with as I understand with Hinduism, but most of what I understand of like Buddhists, that's not, I mean, depending on the flavor of Buddhism that you like, there's not the same kickback. It's like, well, look, if you're not practicing our Buddhism, I hope you are meditating because I'm worried about you, or something like that, right? And it's interesting because I was thinking about it today. If you go over the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism that Siddhartha taught, as he taught it, he beats Abrahamic religion, in my opinion, in terms of, yeah, that's true, or that's plausible on four. He's 4 for 4 pretty much. And I'm like, looking at him like, but just like what you said earlier, you start with this idea in the Abrahamic faith. It starts with this main idea. There is a mind that created all of us and has a plan. Mm-hmm. Nope. If you don't have that, every other point of every Abrahamic religion, why go on? You can't go on to anything else. If that point's not true, there's nothing else to say. Whereas, the Buddha started with the first principle in Sanskrit was dukkha, which is all that is born suffers. I was like, okay, hold on here. Yeah, that checks out. It's like that's he's one for one. He's beat Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad right there, right? And it's like then he goes on to this point two, which is karma. It's just that the more attached you are to the material and or the worldly things, the mundane worldly things, the more dukkha is going to come to you. I don't know what the data shows necessarily on that, but in experience, I'm like, I mean, that does fit. That fits my experience, fits everything I know about other people's experience. So 2 for 2, Siddhartha, and then, you go from there. And I think that's probably why what in Western culture, atheism is so much more combative, I feel, than it is in Eastern culture. And maybe that's why women don't like it. Because I notice a lot of women, I told you the story about the title of my book, why I figured out that my book didn't sell very well.
No, what was it? I don't know.
The Korihor argument. So I came upon the statistic that said women buy more digital products than men. So I said, I'm going to make everything about my book real sexy. I'm going to make it like to where women would go, I wonder what's in this book. I wonder what's in this story. So I the color selection, everything about them. Like, I bet you they'd like this. And I just guessed, right? And it sold fine for about a month and then just kind of dropped off. Now, a lot of that was I didn't invest in advertising. So lesson learned there. Another part was it was too long. And the third one was I didn't release it on Audible. And most people these days are just listening to books on audiobook. So, but then I asked women, I took like a survey. I'm like, tell me about this book that you looked at and would you buy it? Would you not buy it? And why not? And the number one piece of feedback I got was, I hate the title. I'm like, the title? Really? Is it the part that says the Korihor argument or the subtitle that says A Missionary's Journey Out of Mormonism? And they said, it's argument. I got this from like a dozen people.
Yeah.
Argument. I'm like, really? Why argument? And they're like, I don't want to have an argument. That's off-putting. And I said, well, but you get it's like a philosophical argument. And they're like, I don't care. I'm like, lesson learned. Lesson learned there. You know what I mean? So you agree that's off-putting then, the very word of it. Yeah, see? There you go. That's why you check with women first. That's probably the best first example of my going, I had to wake up to this. Don't do anything till you talk to women first.
Somebody is actually talking to women now. For the first time in history of America. So thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe, for being a trailblazer.
I should hope there was someone before me.
Do we have time for one more quickie and then to wrap up?
Sure. Okay,
let me see. Let's do, somebody asked me recently, I think this week, how do you, the Korihor discussion, I like that too. How do you face death as an atheist? It seems horrible, depressing. Oh, wow, I'm just going to die and then I'm dead. So the death question. I think that's probably one of the biggest questions that I get overall when I say that I'm atheist. First of all, it's always you're going to hell. You are under Satan's influence. And then it's, well, how sad. Like, what do you think about death? You're just going to die. And then they'll get personal. Oh, you're never going to see Brody again. Oh, so you just believe you're just going to poof and you're never going to live with Kevin. So it's probably the biggest, isn't that one of the biggies? It's creation and death.
Yeah.
So well, how do you face death? That was a specific question. How do you face death? Isn't it just depressing?
Yeah. I mean, death can be depressing. And more importantly, nihilism is depressing. Because, I mean, death, when you think about it, death isn't so scary, isn't so depressing. It's the...
what is the people in this? The pain and the people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all fair. I yeah, that makes sense. For
Like, I
me,
love this
it's
person. I don't want to lose this person. So, what do you think? What do you think about how do you face the fear of death as an atheist? Is it just
yeah.
depressing?
For me, I've done a lot of work around and a lot of thinking around the four aspects of death that I call them the four gates. As a matter of fact, I've been working on for a while a script of a kind of guided meditation about four gates for people who are dealing with this very problem. Because really, it's not just death, in my opinion. Everything that lives dies, and when you think about it, it's a good thing that we do because it's exhausting. Eventually, you got to set this down. Now we have this wiring in our brain that says, yeah, but you have to survive. Some people do, not everybody, right? I think personally, that part of me I turned off a long time ago, but I have depression. So, and so the other side of that is, I think that people, what they really fear is the absurdity or the isolation. And that of the four gates, those are the ones that really turn people off and bring them and make them afraid. What if everything that I went through means nothing? Or what if I go into that final door into the dial tone, the eternal dial tone, all by myself? And for me,
And then
it's
you
like,
got Jesus in the clouds, and grandma's waiting for you, and we all have wings and a halo and harps. What if that isn't on the other side? Or the celestial
yeah,
kingdom,
yeah. That's why,
nirvana,
I mean,
whatever that is. Yeah. And
you
it's
know,
just me.
there's Pascal's wager, right? Which
Mhm.
is that just briefly for those at home and in the future, basically Pascal was a mathematician who said, even if you don't think it's probable, because that was his thing, his jam was probability math.
Yeah.
And he's like, even if God is improbable, you're better off going to church and saying prayers to convince yourself of God, because hell is forever. And if there's no hell and there's no God, then you just die, and then there's nothing to worry about. So it's better off going to church, saying the prayers, and then convincing yourself of God and hell, so because nothing, however good anything happens to you in this life, nothing could possibly counterbalance the weight of an eternity in hell. Of course, any logical person's going to sit down and answer that pretty quickly, I hope, and say, yeah, but that's only in like this one religion. Where God says you won't come home and be with me if you don't come to a belief in me in spite of all evidence to the contrary. It's like, yeah, that's this religion, but all these other religions are like, nah, dude, nothing to worry about. We think you're going to go to heaven, they're going to go to heaven, just be a good person or whatever, right? And it's like, and then the other side of that is, wouldn't hell be living with that being forever? It's like, yeah, I decided I didn't want to send you to hell because they have gay people and trans people down there. You don't want to be with them. Wouldn't you look at them and go, wait a minute, I don't think I want to be with somebody who would say something like that for eternity. That's my hell, right? And so it's like, it just seems like those are all valid reasons to say, well, hold up, Pascal. I need more than that, buddy. I need something like, there is a valid reason to believe that consciousness goes on beyond this life. And absent that, I'm going to look at it and say, can I make something meaningful about this life, knowing that it ends? And then suddenly this finish line idea comes about. It says, you know what? I've got to come to the finish line one way or another. And you get to the finish line, you win if you come in last, and you win if you come in first, right? So isn't it really more about what milestones you reach along the way? Isn't it more about the experience of the race? Isn't it about the nature? Isn't it about the other runners? All of a sudden there's this subjective meaning. And it's like, well, but that's not real. That's not objective. I mean, that's a matter of opinion, but yes. Okay. If objective morals and duties and values means they are values that exist without human minds to judge them, then that's right. There's no objective morality. And, Hitler's Holocaust isn't bad because it's bad. It's bad because we think it's bad. Get your head around it. It's fine. But if we are the only judges in the universe, then that's all that matters. It doesn't, the fact, what makes the morals matter is the fact that we are here in the universe judging them. And, as Hamlet says, nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. The fact that it's not written down on a rock and, somewhere on one of the moons of Jupiter, and it's like, oh no, it's right here. Don't kill the Jews. It's right here. Somebody wrote it down, they just hid it from us all these years.
We have that written inside of us because we are empathetic creatures. We can see suffering. We can see pain. And I think that that's one of our problems. I had a discussion with Jacob Hansen. I don't know if he's just too much of a coward to post our episode, but I had a discussion with Jacob about atheism. And he kept asking about right and wrong and sin and evil and good and bad and, values. I don't need values. I have empathy. I can see if I'm kicking somebody or whatever, depriving them of something, gossiping about them. I can experience with my consciousness that I am causing suffering for that person. I don't need a book and the thing written on the rock that says, don't kill whoever. I don't need that because that's hard baked into my natural instincts. Very few humans are psychopaths. Like I've heard the percentage between like 1.5% to 3%. I don't know if you have a different percentage. Very few percent of the human population is actually psychopathic, where we don't have empathy. So most humans have the capacity that is born within us to experience, without even experiencing it, the suffering of another person. And without being told, without a commandment, without a man in the sky, without rules, laws, or anything, just not do it. Like that's just part of it. That's who we are. And it's a survival instinct because if we didn't have that, then humans, no animal life would still exist because we would just be Lord of the Flies, willy-nilly, everybody's killing piggy. We wouldn't be here anymore.
Right.
That's a discussion that I also had with Jacob Hansen about, everything would erupt into like chaos and anarchy. And I don't know how he put it. I can't remember. I'm misquoting him 100%. But there was a question around, well, without religion, without God, without the gospel, then everything is just a free-for-all. There's no values and it's, murder and mayhem everywhere. Actually murder and mayhem, we can see that in the human timeline that actually started once we built a fence and put a cow inside the fence, and now we're fighting over possessions, we're fighting over women, we're fighting over children. It's the breeders and the offspring and the food sources and this land that I say this is the part of earth that I own. That's actually when we started breaking into anarchy, once we stopped being communal creatures and started fighting over possessions. And so then to control our anger and our angst and the fact that we were then committing human on human homicide, we then had to come up with here's some laws, but because you don't think that my power is absolute, I'm going to tell you that there's some God in the sky or a pantheon of gods in the sky, and you can't see them, but they're watching us and they're so powerful that they just made it rain and now they've given us a drought for 7 years and they are all powerful. And if you fight over the fence and the cow and the women and the offspring, then you're going to be cursed, smitten, executed, stoned to death, whatever the thing is. We had to come up with these external controls because we were fighting over possessions when really these are some of the great thinkers like Buddha and Yeshua. They come in with, and honestly, like Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh had some interesting ideas. It got a little kooky though in the end. We come in with just like basic knowledge. Humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, are communal creatures. And when we have abundance and when we work cooperatively, we don't need external rules. because we have the rules inside of every cell in our body of how to survive without harming one another.
I love that. I love that. I mean, it sounds to me like you've got great answers for these people when they ask you, Jenny. I mean, you got it. I mean, like I got my thing, but I like yours.
I like yours. And I
What's
think
that?
there are thoughts out. I like yours, and I think that there are thoughts outside of religion. So, the facing fear of death. Did you have anything else to say in your little topic?
Yeah. So I'll just make it. I'll make
you
it
were
easy.
done.
No, it's fine. No, that's great. But what it came down to was creativity. Is that we have this anxiety. Like Rollo May had this theory, and I do think he's right. And that what we think of when you say somebody has anxiety, when you say you have general anxiety, and when people say they have existential anxiety about which is like an existential crisis, especially if you think about ending it all. And he's like, these are not two different kinds of anxiety. These are the same thing. It is the internal world clashing against the external world, trying to make it different and frustrated. And the frustration of saying it's not the way it should be, that drives us to want to create, whether that's art, literature, or freaking Excel spreadsheets. It doesn't matter. It's something that says, I got to get out there and I got to get a handle on this world and bend it some way. And he says, if you don't do it, if you just sit there and let it paralyze you, the shock of it paralyze you so that you can't move your body and go do something, it can be so. It can break your mind. It can break your psyche. And he knew that, because I'll tell you a little bit about this guy, Rollo May. He was a Presbyterian minister at the start of his career. He went out to Europe and started teaching English through the church. And while he was in Europe, while fascism was rising out there, he saw it broke him. He was startled at what he was seeing, with how religious people particularly were, picking up on fascism and just loving it. And in the midst of that, he starts to talk to psychologists. Now, this is when Sigmund Freud's people are all coming up and are all practicing psychotherapy out there, including Viktor Frankl, who eventually writes Man's Search for Meaning, and about his experience in the Holocaust, in the camps. And he says that it was talking to them that he realized his career. He doesn't say it this way, but basically his career in the ministry wasn't going to help anybody. Wasn't going to help people the way that he wanted to. And so he decided to come home to America and started to become a therapist. But when he got home, there was an outbreak of typhoid fever out in New York, and he got typhoid. And he went to a sanatorium where he basically had to lay there for days on end. Basically, they would do one X-ray a week because they didn't want to over irradiate them. Frankly, they were over radiating them as it is. And you'd get, right? They get one chest X-ray a week, and then they decide, is the hole getting bigger or getting smaller? And so the rest of the week, you just had to lay there with all these other people and watch as the beds go empty. And it's like, the hole's getting bigger, the hole's getting smaller, and if their hole was getting bigger and it suddenly got bigger, he's like, you knew right away that bed's going to be empty in 2 or 3 days. And it's like, and sure enough. And so people would just sit there, they would lie there just in a constant state of anxiety. And that's where he started to put together his dissertation on, I'm going to focus my life's work on figuring out what anxiety is and what meaning is and why we have to have meaning in order to beat this anxiety. And in the process, he discovered it's not meaning at all. It's creativity. You have to you can't just lay there waiting to die. You've got to get up and move. You got to do something You got to let that inner world make its mark on the outer worlds, or else you'll sit there and literally drive yourself nuts. And so it that moved me in ways I can't even tell you. And then, I mean, that's a brief encapsulation of books and books that this guy has written on the subject. So yeah, that's
fascinating. We're going to have to talk later about an experience that I had with that same exact thing.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Cool.
So.
Cool. Well, yeah. So let's plan on this. We're going to plan on Sunday sermon. There was a possibility we might have a guest sermonizer, but otherwise,
Yes. So my guest sermonizer has been very sick, and I was going to text you. So I'm not sure. I'll touch bases with him today. Him and his girl have both been so sick. They're up in like Bainbridge Island or in the San Juans or something, and it's really cold up there in the winter, and everybody's been sick, like this horrible respiratory illness. So he has been sick. So let me just touch base. I didn't touch base today to see how he is, but I have a couple other guest sermonizers that we could maybe plug into this week.
Okay. That works. Or otherwise, I've got one ready to go, so it's in the hopper. But then the next week we have Jules is preparing us another sermon. I'm so excited for that. So first follow-up sermon for Jules, and then after that, we're planning on you, right, Jenny? I mean, it was
Yes.
So
I have
no pressure.
So. All right.
No pressure.
Okay, we have a good lineup coming up, and we'll go for tonight. We'd love to hear from you guys that are watching this later. If you'd like us to continue to do this, if you have some questions, Joe, I think that it would be fun to do this once a month because like we can do sermons and discussions and kind of bring people together and connect and just talk about things. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of questions about atheism. Everybody already thinks that they know about Christianity and like some of the other major religions. But when I talk about atheism, I feel like there are a lot of misconceptions. And I'd like to answer some of those questions. So if you out there enjoy this, I know I didn't even answer the like, what about the facing fear of death? I'm about 10 hours into using my voice online today, and I can feel my vocal cords straining. So so we'll dive into some different things. If you guys like this, let us know. We'll be hanging out in the comments, and please share and let us know what you'd like to hear more of.
I love it. Jenny, I want to thank you so much for being here and for being a part of this, for being on this journey with me. I don't know what I would do without you. So I really am grateful that you take the initiative, that you organize stuff like this. This is all Jenny's idea, you guys. I think it's been great. So I just want to honor you and appreciate you for the contribution that you're making.
So much. You give me all the validation that none of my bishops and stake presidents and temple presidents and everybody never did. So you're making up for it. You're like healing those Mormon wounds. And I appreciate you too. You're amazing. It's always inspiring to hear your thoughts. And I love the passion that you bring to everything that you do and making the world a better place and a safer space for people who are religiously deconstructing and transitioning. So I appreciate you. I appreciate our partnership and everything that we're doing here. You're great. We are going to try to do a church potluck virtual hangout at some point. It's been really hard with my movie, but be watching for that coming up because I think it would be fun to have everybody on the Zoom and do a little hang out. So cool. Good stuff going on. Thank you guys.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
Have a good night. Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Like Korihor, I was lost and alone. Like Korihor, cast far from home. Like Korihor, they stole my voice. Like Korihor, left without a choice. But unlike Korihor, I can speak again. Unlike Korihor, I have a friend. In my darkest hour, my hope was renewed, because unlike Korihor, I had you. Like Korihor, no guardian angels flew. Like Korihor, shamed by those I never knew. At no God's command, my own footprints remain in this sand. But unlike Korihor, I can speak again. Unlike Korihor, I have a friend. In my darkest hour, my hope was renewed, because unlike Korihor, I had you. Like Korihor, you helped me to see. Like Korihor, you lit the path for me. Because of you, I'm not without a home. Because of you, I'll never walk alone.
All right, fellowship, there's a link for Linger Longer now in the comments, in the live comments of the chat. Head on over there. And yeah, I hope that you guys get a chance to linger longer for a few minutes. You know, we like to have a good time. Hopefully that link works. Otherwise, just head on back to the live tab on the page, and I'll see you guys at Linger Longer. Flash bright.